Are you okay, sir?
I think they broke my leg.
We need to get you out of here. Sorry, we're closed.
Please, I just need some coffee. It's for my wife. She's at the hospital.
All right, have a seat.
Thank you. Mama Rose would appreciate this.
How do you know Mama Rose?
The last customer of the night stumbled through the door of Mama Rose's cafe just as Zara Jackson was about to flip the sign to closed. Rain streaked down the windows, and the neon sign outside buzzed and flickered, casting pink shadows across the empty booths. Zara had been on her feet for 12 hours straight, her lower back aching and her sneakers soaked through from a spilled pitcher of sweet tea earlier that evening. Hello, friends. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please support me by subscribing to my channel, like and share this video to your family and friends. I truly appreciate your kind heart. So, let's begin. Zara was 28 years old and bone-tired, not just from today, but from the endless cycle of working 3 jobs just to keep her head above water. The cafe job, the weekend catering gig, and the night shift at the medical billing company barely covered her rent in the cramped apartment she shared with her younger sister. Her dreams of opening her own restaurant felt as distant as the stars she used to wish on as a little girl in rural Mississippi. The man who entered looked like he'd been through a war. His expensive suit was rumpled and stained, his salt and pepper hair disheveled, and he moved with the unsteady gait of someone who'd had too much to drink. Way too much. Despite his obvious wealth, Zara could tell quality when she saw it, even when it was wrinkled. There was something heartbreakingly lost about him. "Please," he said, his voice thick and slurred. I need somewhere to sit for a minute." Zara looked at the clock. 11:58 p.m. In 2 minutes, she should be locking up, heading home to collapse into bed before her 6 a.m. shift at the billing company. She had every right to turn him away, to tell him to find an all-night diner somewhere else. Instead, she heard her grandmother's voice in her head. "Baby girl, we help folks when they're down. That's what separates us from the wolves." "Come on in, honey," Zara said, her southern accent still thick after 8 years in the city. "Let me get you some coffee." The man's eyes filled with tears at her simple kindness, and in that moment, Zara knew she was looking at someone whose world had just fallen apart. Money couldn't fix everything, she realized. Sometimes the richest people were the most broken. "Thank you," he whispered, sliding into a corner booth. "I'm William Ashford." "Zara," she replied, already moving toward the coffee machine. "Zara Jackson. And you look like you could use more than just coffee. When's the last time you ate something?" William stared at her as if she'd spoken a foreign language. I don't remember." Without asking, Zara pulled out ingredients for her grandmother's remedy for heartbreak, scrambled eggs with cheese, buttered toast, and thick-cut bacon. As she cooked, William sat in stunned silence, occasionally wiping his eyes with napkins from the dispenser. "My son," he said suddenly, his voice cracking. "My only child. He died today." Zara's hand stilled on the spatula. She turned to look at this broken man in his expensive suit, and her heart cracked open. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Car accident, 25 years old." William's voice was barely a whisper. "I was supposed to have dinner with him tonight. We were going to talk about him taking over the business. I waited at the restaurant for 2 hours before they called." The eggs were ready, but Zara couldn't move. She thought about her own sister, about how devastated she'd be if anything happened to her. What was his name? Marcus Ashford. William smiled through his tears. He was going to change the world, always talking about making things better, helping people. He volunteered at homeless shelters, tutored kids in the inner city, said he wanted to use our family's money to make a real difference. Zara slid the plate in front of him, then did something she'd never done with a customer. She sat down across from him. "Tell me about him." For the next how, William talked. He told her about Marcus's laugh, about how he'd insisted on attending public school instead of private academies, about his dreams of turning the family hotel empire into something that served communities instead of just wealthy tourists. He talked about their arguments, their reconciliations, and all the conversations they'd never have now. Zara listened, occasionally refilling his coffee, sometimes just holding space for his grief. She thought about her own relationship with her sister, how they'd grown closer since their parents died, how they looked out for each other in a world that often felt hostile to young black women trying to make their way. "He would have liked you," William said eventually, looking at Zara with eyes that were clearer now but infinitely sadder. "You have you care about people the same way he did." "Where do you live?" Zara asked gently. "Do you have someone who can come get you?" William laughed bitterly. "The Grandview Hotel, penthouse suite. And no, there's no one. My wife died when Marcus was 12. My business partners are vultures who'll be circling before the funeral arrangements are made. I have a brother, but we haven't spoken in 15 years. Zara knew the Grandview, everyone in the city did. It was the most luxurious hotel downtown, the kind of place she'd only seen in movies. She also knew that William shouldn't be driving, not in his condition. "I can take you home," she offered. "You don't understand," William said, shaking his head. I can't pay you. Not because I don't have money, but because I've lost my wallet, my phone, everything. I stumbled out of that restaurant and just walked. For hours. In the rain." Zara studied his face, seeing the raw honesty there. "I'm not asking you to pay me. I'm offering because it's the right thing to do." 30 minutes later, she was driving her aging Honda Accord through the empty streets, William silent in the passenger seat. The rain had stopped, but the city looked washed clean, like it was ready for a fresh start. "Why?" William asked suddenly. "Why would you help a stranger? Stay late at work, drive across town, not ask for anything in return?" Zara considered the question. "My grandmother raised me and my sister after our parents died in Hurricane Katrina. We lost everything. Our house, most of our family photos, all the things that made us feel secure. But people helped us. Strangers who didn't owe us anything gave us food, clothes, a place to stay until we could get back on our feet." She pulled into the Grandview's circular drive, where a doorman immediately approached despite the late hour. "Grandmama always said that kindness is like a seed," Zara continued. "You plant it wherever you can, and sometimes it grows into something beautiful. Maybe not for you, but for someone else down the line." William stared at her for a long moment. "What's your last name again?" "Jackson. Zara Jackson." "I won't forget you, Zara Jackson," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't forget what you did tonight." As Zara drove home, she felt a strange sense of completion, as if she'd been exactly where she was supposed to be at exactly the right time. She thought about William's son Marcus, about the dreams he'd had for changing the world, and she said a little prayer for both of them. A week passed. Zara fell back into her routine. Cafe shifts, billing company, catering gigs, trying to save money she didn't have for dreams that felt impossible. She thought about William occasionally, wondering if he was okay, but she didn't expect to hear from him again. In her experience, the wealthy lived in a different world, one where kindness from service workers was quickly forgotten. On Thursday morning, she was restocking napkin dispensers when a man in an expensive suit walked into the cafe. Not William. This man was younger, maybe in his 40s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper smile. "Are you Zara Jackson?" he asked. "Yes," Zara replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" The man extended his hand. "I'm James Morrison, attorney for the Ashford estate. I have some documents for you to review." Zara's blood ran cold. Estate documents. That could only mean one thing. Is he... "Mr. Ashford is alive and well," James said quickly. "But he's made some significant changes to his will and business holdings. Changes that concern you directly." With shaking hands, Zara accepted the thick manila envelope James offered. Inside were legal documents that made no sense to her, pages of corporate language and official seals. "I don't understand," she said. James smiled, and this time it seemed genuine. "Mr. Ashford has transferred ownership of the Grandview Hotel to you, Ms. Jackson. As of yesterday, you are the sole proprietor of a property worth approximately $47 million. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She sat down hard on the nearest stool, the documents scattering across the counter. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I assure you, it's quite legal and binding. Mr. Ashford was very specific about his wishes." James pulled out a sealed letter. "He asked me to give you this." With trembling fingers, Zara opened the envelope. William's handwriting was precise but emotional. "Dear Zara, a week ago, I was ready to die. Not from any physical ailment, but from a spiritual emptiness that felt bottomless. I had lost the most important person in my world, and I couldn't see any reason to continue living. I was planning to drive my car off the Riverside Bridge when I stopped at your cafe instead. You saved my life that night, not just by keeping me from driving drunk, but by showing me that kindness still exists in this world. You reminded me of my son Marcus and the values he tried to live by. You showed me that there are still people who help others simply because it's right. Marcus always said our family's wealth was meaningless unless it was used to lift others up. He dreamed of turning the Grandview into something that served the community, not just the wealthy elite. I've spent this week researching your background, and I believe you are the person who can fulfill his vision. You have a business degree from community college, experience in food service, and most importantly, the heart to use this opportunity responsibly. I've also included a trust fund of $2 million for renovations and operating expenses, as well as a full management team to help with the transition. This is not charity, Zara. This is an investment in the kind of person who stays late to help a broken stranger, who gives without expecting anything in return. My son would be proud to know that his dreams are in your hands. I've moved to my house in the mountains, where I plan to spend my remaining years remembering my boy and finding peace. But I wanted you to know that your kindness created ripples that will touch countless lives. The Grandview is yours now. Make it matter. With gratitude and hope, William Ashford. Zara read the letter 3 times before it began to sink in. The lawyer was still talking, explaining about management teams and transition plans and legal procedures, but his words faded into background noise. She thought about her grandmother, about Hurricane Katrina, about all the small kindnesses that had shaped her life. "There's one more thing," James said, pulling out another document. "Mr. Ashford left specific instructions about the hotel's mission. He wants it to become a training ground for hospitality workers from underserved communities, with a portion of the profits going to local charities. Think of it as a business that happens to help people, rather than a charity that happens to make money." That evening, Zara stood in the penthouse suite of the Grandview Hotel, looking out at the city lights below. The space was elegant, but not ostentatious, with floor-to-ceiling windows and comfortable furnishings that spoke of good taste rather than show-off wealth. She thought about William, alone in his mountain house with his grief, and about Marcus, whose dreams were now somehow her responsibility. Her sister Ava had cried when Zara called her with the news. "Baby, this is like something out of a movie," she'd said. "What are you going to do?" What was she going to do? The question felt enormous. She was a waitress who'd been struggling to pay rent a week ago. Now she owned a hotel empire and had the resources to change lives. The responsibility was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Zara pulled out her phone and called the number James had given her for the hotel's general manager, a woman named Patricia, who'd been running day-to-day operations for years. "Patricia, this is Zara Jackson. I know this situation is unusual, but I'd like to schedule a meeting with you and the department heads tomorrow morning. I have some ideas about changes we might make." "Of course, Ms. Jackson. Might I ask what kind of changes?" Zara looked out at the city, thinking about her grandmother's words about planting seeds of kindness. I want to talk about how we can serve our community better, how we can use this place to create opportunities for people who might not otherwise have them, how we can honor the memory of Marcus Ashford and the values he believed in." There was a pause, then Patricia's voice came back warmer than before. "I think that sounds wonderful, Ms. Jackson. Marcus would have loved those ideas. He used to talk about the same things." After hanging up, Zara walked through the suite that was now hers, touching the furniture that cost more than she used to make in a year, looking at artwork that belonged in museums. But what struck her most was a photo on the desk, William and a young man who had to be Marcus, both laughing at some shared joke. The young man had kind eyes, the kind of eyes that belonged to someone who cared about making the world better. "I won't let you down," she whispered to the photo. "Either of you." Over the next few months, Zara threw herself into learning everything she could about running a luxury hotel. The learning curve was steep and sometimes overwhelming. She studied financial reports until her eyes burned, attended hospitality conferences where she was often the only black woman in rooms full of established industry veterans, and worked alongside every department to understand how the Grandview operated. The first few weeks were the hardest. Patricia, the general manager, was supportive but clearly skeptical about some of Zara's more ambitious ideas. The head chef, a temperamental man named Claude, who'd been with the hotel for 15 years, bristled at suggestions that the restaurant menus could be more inclusive. Several longtime staff members seemed to be waiting for her to fail, whispering in corners about the waitress who got lucky. But Zara had learned resilience in a hard school. Growing up poor in Mississippi, then struggling in the city, had taught her that persistence mattered more than pedigree. She arrived at the hotel every morning at 6 a.m. and rarely left before 8 p.m., determined to understand every aspect of the operation. "You don't have to prove yourself to them," Ava told her one evening, when Zara came home exhausted and discouraged. "You own the damn place." "Ownership isn't the same as leadership," Zara replied, rubbing her tired eyes. "I need them to believe in what we're trying to build, not just follow orders because they have to." They began asking questions, offering ideas, sharing their own visions for what the hotel could become. But implementing these changes proved more challenging than inspiring them. The first major crisis came when 3 longtime guests, wealthy donors to local charities who had been staying at the Grandview for their annual fundraising events, threatened to take their business elsewhere if the hotel continued housing undesirable elements on the 7th floor. Zara found herself in her office at midnight, staring at financial projections that showed the potential loss of over $400,000 in annual revenue if these guests followed through on their threats. The responsible business decision would be to quietly scale back the transitional housing program to prioritize profit over principle. Instead, she picked up her phone and called William. "I hope I'm not waking you," she said when he answered. "Not at all. I don't sleep much these days. What's troubling you, my dear?" Zara explained the situation, the guest complaints, the financial pressure, the doubt that was creeping into her confidence. "Marcus faced something similar once," William said quietly. "When he was in college, he organized a fundraiser for homeless services. Several major donors threatened to pull their support if the event included actual homeless individuals telling their stories. They wanted to help the homeless in theory, but they didn't want to be confronted with the reality of homelessness. What did he do? He told them that charity without compassion is just tax deduction. He said if they truly wanted to help people, they needed to be willing to see them as human beings, not just causes to support from a distance." William's voice grew warm with the memory. He lost those donors, but he gained something more valuable, the respect of people who understood that real change requires real courage. "And what if I lose the hotel? What if this idealism destroys what you've built?" William was quiet for a moment. "Zara, do you remember what you told me that night in your car? About kindness being like a seed?" "Yes. Some seeds grow quickly, producing immediate results. Others take longer, requiring patience and faith before they bear fruit. But the most important thing about planting seeds is that you have to be willing to tend the garden even when you can't see the growth happening underground." The next morning, Zara called a press conference. Standing in the Grandview's elegant lobby, with transitional housing residents visible in the background going about their daily lives, she addressed the local media. "The Grandview Hotel has always been a symbol of excellence in this city," she began. "Today, I want to talk about what excellence means in the 21st century. It's not enough to provide luxury amenities while ignoring the needs of our broader community. True excellence means using our success to create opportunities for others." She went on to explain the hotel's new initiatives, the scholarship programs, the apprenticeships, the community partnerships. She talked about Marcus Ashford's vision and her commitment to honoring it. And she addressed the controversy directly. "Some people have expressed concern about our transitional housing program, worried that it might somehow diminish their experience at the Grandview. I want to assure you that our standards for service and luxury haven't changed, but I also want to challenge you to think about what kind of community we want to build together." The response was mixed, but ultimately positive. Several new corporate clients reached out, attracted by the hotel's community focus. A major magazine wanted to feature the Grandview in a story about socially responsible businesses. Most importantly, the hotel's staff began to embody the values Zara was promoting, providing service that went beyond mere professionalism to genuine care. The real test came 6 months later, during the hotel's annual charity gala, a prestigious event that had traditionally raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for local causes. Previous years had featured wealthy donors congratulating themselves for their generosity while enjoying expensive wine and elaborate meals. Zara transformed the event completely. Instead of just talking about helping the community, she invited community members to share their stories. Marcus Williams, a young man who had graduated from one of the hotel's apprenticeship programs and was now working as a sous chef at a respected restaurant, spoke about how the opportunity had changed his life. Sarah Chen, a single mother who had stayed in the transitional housing program while completing nursing school, talked about the dignity and hope she'd found during a difficult time. The most powerful moment came when Zara introduced Mrs. Dorothy Washington, an elderly woman who had been evicted from her apartment and was living in her car when the Grandview's outreach program found her. "6 months ago, I thought my life was over," Mrs. Washington said, her voice steady despite her emotional words. "I was 73 years old, living in my car, too proud to ask my children for help because I didn't want to be a burden. I thought I had become invisible to the world." She paused, looking around the room at faces that were rapt with attention. "The folks at the Grandview didn't just give me a place to stay. They treated me like I mattered. They helped me navigate the system to get my Social Security benefits straightened out. They connected me with a senior housing program. But most importantly, they reminded me that I wasn't invisible, that my life had value regardless of my circumstances." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. When the evening ended, the gala had raised more money than any previous year, but more importantly, it had created connections between people who might never have otherwise encountered each other's stories. As the hotel's reputation grew, so did the challenges and opportunities. National media attention brought both praise and scrutiny. Zara found herself invited to speak at conferences about social entrepreneurship, profiled in business magazines as an example of transformational leadership. But with visibility came pressure. A competing hotel chain, threatened by the Grandview's success, began spreading rumors about declining service quality and questioning the financial sustainability of Zara's programs. Anonymous online reviews appeared, claiming the hotel had become too political and was prioritizing social causes over guest satisfaction. The attacks stung, but they also revealed something important. The Grandview was changing the conversation about what a successful business could be. Other hotels began implementing similar programs. A restaurant group in Chicago reached out to Zara for advice on creating apprenticeship programs. A real estate developer in Atlanta wanted to partner on affordable housing initiatives. The most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. One evening, as Zara was walking through the lobby, she noticed an elderly black man in an expensive suit studying the wall of photos that chronicled the hotel's community programs. He looked familiar, but she couldn't place him. "Excuse me," he said, approaching her with a warm smile. Are you Ms. Jackson? Yes, I am. My name is Robert Johnson. I'm a retired federal judge. I wanted to thank you personally for what you've done with this place. Judge Johnson went on to explain that he had been one of the first black lawyers to integrate the city's legal community in the 1960s. For decades, he had been turned away from establishments like the Grandview, not because he couldn't afford them, but because of his race. To see a young black woman not just owning a place like this, but using it to lift up others. He paused, his eyes glistening. It reminds me why we fought so hard for change. It reminds me that progress is possible. They talked for over an hour, with Judge Johnson sharing stories of the civil rights era and Zara describing her vision for the hotel's future. As he prepared to leave, he pressed something into her hand, a small pin that bore the seal of the federal judiciary. This was given to me when I was confirmed as a judge, he said. I want you to have it as a reminder that your work here is part of a much larger story of progress and justice. That conversation stayed with Zara for weeks. She began to understand that her role at the Grandview was about more than running a business or even helping individual people. She was part of a continuum of change, building on the sacrifices and achievements of previous generations while creating opportunities for future ones. The understanding deepened when she received a letter from Marcus's college roommate, a young man named David who had heard about the hotel's transformation through mutual friends. Dear Ms. Jackson, I hope you don't mind hearing from a stranger, but I felt compelled to write after learning about what you've done with the Grandview. Marcus and I were roommates for 3 years, and he talked constantly about his dreams for using his family's wealth to create positive change. Marcus would spend hours sketching out plans for community-centered businesses, for ways to use privilege to create opportunities for others. He was particularly passionate about the hospitality industry because he believed it could be a bridge between different communities, a place where people from all backgrounds could work together and serve each other. Reading about your programs, the apprenticeships, the transitional housing, the emphasis on community, it's like seeing Marcus's dreams come to life. You've taken his vision further than even he imagined, and you've done it with a wisdom and compassion that would have inspired him immensely. I'm a lawyer now, working in corporate law, but increasingly interested in social impact work. Your example has motivated me to look for ways to use my skills to serve others. I wanted you to know that Marcus's legacy is living on not just through your work, but through the people like me who are inspired by what you're accomplishing. Thank you for keeping his memory alive in such a beautiful way. With admiration and respect, David Chen. The letter moved Zara deeply, but it also brought a new weight of responsibility. She wasn't just running a hotel or even honoring William's generosity. She was stewarding the dreams of a young man she had never met, but who had somehow become central to her sense of purpose. 2 years into her ownership, the Grandview faced its biggest challenge yet. A major recession hit the hospitality industry hard, with tourism declining and corporate events being canceled en masse. Several luxury hotels in the city were forced to close temporarily, and others laid off significant portions of their staff. The pressure to cut costs was enormous. The hotel's board of advisors, which William had established to provide guidance, urged Zara to suspend the community programs and reduce staff to maintain profitability. The transitional housing program alone was costing the hotel $200,000 annually, money that could make the difference between staying open and closing. I understand your commitment to these programs, Patricia, the general manager, said during a particularly tense budget meeting. But if we don't make some hard choices now, we might not have a hotel left to run these programs. Zara stared at the financial projections spread across the conference table. The numbers were stark. Without significant cost-cutting, the hotel would be operating at a loss within 6 months. Every rational business instinct told her to scale back, to prioritize survival over social impact. Instead, she called an all-staff meeting. I know you're all worried about your jobs, she began, looking around at faces that reflected anxiety and uncertainty. I know the news is full of layoffs and closures, and I know some of you are wondering if the Grandview will be next. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Here's what I can promise you. As long as I own this hotel, we will not sacrifice our values for short-term financial gain. Yes, we're facing challenges. Yes, we need to be creative and work harder than ever. But we're not going to abandon the programs that make this place special, and we're not going to abandon each other. Over the next few months, Zara implemented what she called creative sustainability. Instead of cutting programs, she found ways to make them revenue-generating. The transitional housing program began partnering with social service agencies that could provide funding. The apprenticeship program attracted grants from foundations interested in workforce development. The community events program started hosting paid corporate retreats focused on social responsibility. Most importantly, the hotel's reputation for authentic community engagement attracted a new kind of clientele. Socially conscious travelers, purpose-driven corporations, organizations looking for venues that aligned with their values. While traditional luxury travelers were cutting back, this new market was actively seeking out businesses that demonstrated social impact. The strategy worked, but barely. The hotel stayed profitable, maintained its staff, and continued its programs, but there were months when Zara wasn't sure they would make payroll. She often lay awake at night, wondering if she was being irresponsibly idealistic, if her commitment to principle was putting people's livelihoods at risk. The validation came in an unexpected form. A group of hospitality industry leaders, impressed by the Grandview's resilience during the recession, invited Zara to speak at the National Hotel Association's annual conference. She was the youngest speaker ever invited and one of only 3 women on the program. Standing before an audience of hundreds of hotel executives, Zara felt the weight of the moment. These were people who had built successful businesses using traditional models, who measured success primarily in profit margins and market share. What could she possibly tell them that they didn't already know? 3 years ago, I was a waitress who couldn't afford to pay for community college, she began. Today, I own a hotel worth nearly $50 million. That transformation wasn't just a stroke of luck. It was the result of someone believing that kindness and compassion are not obstacles to success, but the foundation of it. She went on to describe the Grandview's model, the programs they had implemented, and the financial and social returns they had generated. But more than the specifics, she talked about a different way of thinking about business success. We've been taught that profit and purpose are in conflict, that caring for people is a luxury we can afford only after we've maximized shareholder value, she said. But what if that's backwards? What if taking care of people, employees, customers, communities is actually the most reliable path to sustainable profitability? The response was enthusiastic, but it was the conversations afterward that mattered most. Hotel executives approached Zara with questions about implementing similar programs in their properties. A major hotel chain expressed interest in developing a partnership. Investors inquired about franchising the Grandview model. For the first time, Zara began to see the possibility that what they had built could expand beyond a single hotel. The principles that had guided her transformation of the Grandview, treating employees as partners, serving community needs, measuring success in human terms as well as financial ones, could potentially influence an entire industry. But first, she had a promise to keep. A year after that rainy night at Mama Rose's cafe, Zara received a letter from William. He was still living quietly in the mountains, he wrote, but he'd been following her progress through news reports and updates from the hotel management. Dear Zara, I wanted you to know that Marcus visits me in my dreams sometimes. He's proud of what you've done with the Grandview. You've taken his vision further than he ever imagined, and you've done it with the same grace and integrity you showed a broken stranger in a cafe. I've been thinking about legacy lately, what we leave behind when we're gone. I used to think legacy was about buildings with your name on them, about accumulating wealth and power. But watching you this past year has taught me that real legacy is about the lives we touch, the opportunities we create for others, the kindness we plant in the world. You didn't just save my life that night, Zara. You saved my soul. You reminded me that goodness exists, that people can choose compassion over indifference, generosity over greed. That's a gift I'll carry with me for whatever time I have left. Keep planting those seeds of kindness, my dear. The garden you're growing will nourish people for generations to come. With love and admiration, William. Zara folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer next to the photo of William and Marcus. Then she walked to the window of her office, not the penthouse suite, which she'd converted into a family shelter, but a smaller office on the management floor, where she could be close to the daily operations of the hotel. The city spread out below her, full of people with their own struggles and dreams, their own moments of kindness and cruelty. Somewhere out there, a waitress was probably staying late to help a customer in need. Somewhere, a stranger was choosing compassion over convenience. Somewhere, seeds of kindness were being planted that would grow in ways the planters could never imagine. Zara's phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Saw the article in the business journal about the hotel's community programs. Grandmama would be so proud. Love you, baby. Yes, Zara thought, Grandmama would be proud. But more than that, she'd understand that this wasn't really about the money or the hotel or even the recognition. It was about the simple truth she'd taught her granddaughters all those years ago. We help folks when they're down, because that's what separates us from the wolves. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Zara made a mental note to call the community center about expanding their literacy program. There was always more work to do, more lives to touch, more kindness to plant in the world. The Grandview Hotel hummed with activity around her, guests checking in, staff preparing for the evening shift, families in the transitional housing program sharing dinner together. It was the sound of a business that had found its soul, of wealth being used to create opportunity rather than simply accumulate more wealth. And somewhere in the mountains, a grieving father slept peacefully for the first time in over a year, knowing that his son's dreams had found the perfect guardian in a woman who understood that true richness had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the size of one's heart. The story that began with a simple act of kindness on a rainy night continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways that would never be fully measured or understood. But then, the most important stories always do. Dear friends, thank you so much for watching. Please support me by subscribing to my channel. And don't forget to like and share this video. It means the world to me. Take care of yourself and never forget how much you're loved. I can't wait to see you in the next video. Sending you all my love.